Intention. That is the word. It's hashtag intention, right? How do we live and make our mark with intentionality? Right? Whatever that dash is, how do we make sure that it's jam packed and aligned with what we want to do, and that it leaves people better than they found them?
Welcome to another episode of Chief Influencer. I'm your host, Anthony Shop, co-founder of Social Driver. Let's face it, Washington is the center of influence in the US and arguably in the world. Chief Influencer features leaders who have figured out how to break through in today's fragmented and fast-changing environment. Social Driver teamed up with the Communications Board and the George Washington University College of Professional Studies to recognize these incredible leaders as chief influencers and highlight how they inspire and influence others. I am thrilled to introduce today's guest, Nneka Chiazor, President of the Public Affairs Council, the premier global association serving public affairs professionals across business, government, and civil society. Now, before we dive in, here are a few things that I think you should know about Nneka. Number one, she brings more than 20 years of leadership experience at the intersection of business strategy and public policy to her somewhat new role at the Public Affairs Council. At Cox Communications, she led one of the company's top 5 markets, managing 1,200 employees and multi-million-dollar operations. And before that, she held senior roles at Verizon, including Vice President of Public Policy, where she worked on critical issues like broadband expansion and public safety. Number two, she's no stranger to the Public Affairs Council. She served on the board of the Public Affairs Council from 2018 to 2023, and she helped shape programming that positioned the council as a trusted resource for corporate, nonprofit, and government affairs leaders. And now as president, she's focused on strengthening the council's value to the C-suite, bridging the gap between business and government in a time of, let's say, increasing complexity. And number three, Nneka is widely respected for her thoughtful leadership and collaborative approach. A champion for ethical influence, strategic engagement, and inclusive leadership, she is helping to define what it means to lead in public affairs today. Nneka, you have been called a public affairs expert, a corporate strategist, a Virginia Humanitarian Award winner, and now, as president of the Public Affairs Council, you are its chief executive. Well, today we are thrilled to call you a chief influencer. Welcome.
Yes, thank you, Anthony. I love the chief influencer title, and thank you for that warm welcome. I feel like a VVIP on your podcast, so thank you so much for having me on.
Well, you are a VVIP, and I'm excited that we're probably introducing you to some folks in the public affairs community in DC who, maybe saw the announcement of your new role as president, but maybe haven't gotten to know you that well yet. And so this is going to be a fun conversation. And I serve on the board of the Public Affairs Council, I should disclose. So really cool opportunity for me to get to do this sit down with you. I want to start with a big picture shift. I mean, for years, a lot of companies treated Washington as a cost center, as a necessity to have lobbyists and public affairs folks and have people in Washington. But I think now more CEOs are seeing public affairs as a strategic investment. And I wonder if you could talk about what's driving that change and how the Public Affairs Council is helping leaders respond to all the complexities in today's world.
Thanks, Anthony. Thank you so much for being on our board. Your service is outstanding. And I'm really glad, right, that I get to do my debut with you. So to your point about, public affairs as a cost center, I would say for the longest time on a number of balance sheets in corporations, government affairs, public affairs, media relations, all the functions that sit under our umbrella of public affairs were viewed as cost items. In some cases, people were not necessarily sure of what is the value of public affairs. But in a time as this, in a time where there is VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, it becomes very clear that we as a public affairs body, we're not a cost center, we're an investment center, right? And that investment often involves social capital, which, as you and I know, is the key to not just unlocking access in Washington, but now it's become the key to unlocking access to markets. I think a lot of folks in the C-suite are starting to see the importance and the strategic relevance of having folks who do have public affairs expertise sit at their table in order to be able to navigate these VUCA times. Navigate VUCA times, for example, like COVID, right? With COVID, we saw the advent of crisis communicators. We saw the advent of people in our profession playing a role in business continuity, right? Fast forward to today with the tariff discussions that are ongoing, who are CEOs turning to help them make it make sense of what's happening with tariffs and how it impacts their bottom line? They're turning to us, Anthony. They're turning
Yeah.
to our members. They're turning to people in the public affairs profession. And let me put a finer point on this. We at the Public Affairs Council, you're a member, but I'll just enroll everyone in the chief influencer space on who we are. So we were inspired by President Eisenhower 70 years ago, who wanted a body to convene business, government, and community together. And voila, came the Public Affairs Council. We do these reports that we issue every year, the State of Public Affairs. We have the State of Public Affairs report for the Americas, and we have one for Europe. Well, guess what? Our recent State of Public Affairs, both continents, show that more than half of the senior leaders in public affairs directly report to the CEO. Why? Well, they directly report to the CEO now because CEOs across the gamut are starting to recognize the value of having public affairs as an investment, right? Not as cost, but as an investment towards unlocking markets and unlocking opportunities. I can go on and on and on about this, Anthony, but our day in the sun has come as public affairs professionals, and I'm glad to be here for it.
I love, well, so much of what you said, but the VUCA acronym, VUCA world, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. I mean, isn't that the truth? And when you talk about what's going on in the world, and you think of that term public affairs, often when people say the public, they're thinking people on the outside. But if I've learned anything from our 100+ chief influencers on the show, it's that you want to have champions on the outside, or we could even just say people who know you and understand you on the outside. You have to have champions on the inside. The people who are in your own company have to know who you are, because now more than ever, they're the ones that are your messengers to the public. I mean, your employees of your large company are saying things about you on social media that other people can see. And I wonder
That's
if you could
right.
just share a little bit about, especially because you have a lot of experience in this and from your previous roles, how public affairs leaders are also thinking about making sure that they get the message right inside, because their own people are trusted messengers to the rest of the world, to the public, as we could call it.
Right. And that is a great question. I'm so glad we're talking about this, right? I think historically, when folks have thought about public affairs, you're 100% right. The view or perception has been you are external facing. You deal with everything outside the walls of whatever entity you represent, whether it's an association or nonprofit or corporation, et cetera. Today's public affairs professional, right, is really an influencer of sorts, and which is why we're on the Chief Influencer podcast. And your role is to help influence towards outcomes both inside the entity and outside the entity. Why this evolution, Anthony? Well, because as a society, the way that we engage has also evolved, right? You have more people that are blurring the lines between personal and professional. Gone are the days, Anthony, when communications was strictly internal. With the advent of social media, what you publish on your intranet, your internal website, quickly gets posted on X, right? Could be turned into a meme on TikTok. And so, as a result of that, folks in our profession have had to learn how to evolve in not just influencing the external world, but also the internal world where they sit, influencing the employee, influencing their managers, influencing the board of directors. And so that sphere of influence for the public affairs professional has now expanded from just being outside your walls to inside as well.
Yeah. It's such a good reminder, I think, for all of us too. I mean, we know it, but yet we really have to reflect on it, and we can't forget it, because it's such an important dynamic of the world that we live in today. I want to go back to something you said earlier. I mean, you've talked about how it's time for the council to deliver more value to the C-suite. And I wonder if you could just share a little bit more about what that looks like in practice. You mentioned, public affairs leaders often now report directly to the CEO. But why is it especially important now? And what more can you say about sort of aligning those public affairs goals with the CEO's priorities?
I think, and that is an excellent question, Anthony. I think if you look back again on how far we've come in the past decade, right? There was a point in time, again, where a lot of organizations thought, public affairs, political contributions, media relations, those are costs to the business. But with this shifting mindset of those are actually investments that help unlock opportunities for our organization, has
Yeah.
also come this evolution for us, for the senior leaders in our profession as well. More is expected of a chief corporate social responsibility officer or a chief
Yes.
communications officer, VP government affairs. The organizations that our folks sit in, more is being demanded of them.
Yeah.
Why is more being demanded of them? Because of the times that we're in, right? And so, with that shift and with that evolution, I recognize that as a council, we too have to do more to ensure that those beacons, right, those North Stars of our profession are equipped not just to handle the public affairs parameters of today, but the public affairs parameters of tomorrow. And
Yeah.
here's something else, too, Anthony, that I've observed in my 7 months on the job. You can't pour from an empty cup. You can't, right? And a lot of times we have senior leaders in our profession who are doing what? They're pouring a lot, Anthony. They're pouring into their teams. They're pouring into their leaders' cups. They're pouring into their external stakeholders. And so it is important that they have a place and a space to go to be poured into. And that, I believe, is the council's number one responsibility. It is on us, right, as a council to make sure that they are fed and that they are nourished in a way that grows them. And so that's
Yes.
why I have my eye on, right, the senior leaders of the profession to make sure that they are not forgotten, because it's a ripple effect as well, right? So if you're poured into as a senior leader in our profession, you in turn are going to pour into those that you lead. It's only right. And again, given the prevalence of more CEOs tapping on the shoulder, our senior leaders, that time has come for the council as well to do more to support them.
It's such a good reminder, especially because, the stakes are higher and the responsibilities have expanded. We've all seen data that says this companies, publicly traded companies, stock price and overall market cap are linked to the reputation of the CEO. We've seen that, the customer and the consumer are not just interested in what you sell, but
That's
what you
right.
stand for. And so with all that additional responsibility, you do have to make sure that your cup isn't empty, because, I just love that. You can't pour from it. And I guess, we talk about corporations. I mean, you've led large business units and high stakes policy efforts. And I wonder if you could talk about how your own corporate background informs the way that you are leading the council and where you see it going in the future.
Absolutely. So I'll say this, I grew my career in the telecommunications, media and communications industry. And one of the things that I think is little known about the industry is we underwrite everyone. And by underwrite, I mean we are the digital infrastructure. And I still say we, even though I'm at the council. But the telecommunications industry is that digital infrastructure that carries everyone, right? So think about the road. Nobody really thinks about the road until there's a pothole. Same
Right.
thing with telecom. And the experience that I gained from working in that sector is the importance of being on and being reliable. Because that is the business of reliability. When you walk into a hospital, right, you expect all the devices to work. When you walk into a supermarket, you expect all the devices, the scan to work. A lot of those devices ride on telecommunications infrastructure. And so, in that environment, what I learned, Anthony, is the importance of being reliable, being trustworthy, and always on, right? And so if you think about public affairs, which is why the pivot to the Public Affairs Council was so great for me, what do people expect of public affairs professionals? They expect us to be reliable. Number one, trust is our currency, right? So that's number two. And three, let's face it, in this day and age, we're always on. X doesn't stop. TikTok has no closing hours, right?
No.
Reputations, as you mentioned earlier, do affect stock prices, valuations, nonprofits, halo effect. And so making that transition for me was a little bit seamless in that regard because I realized, oh, there's some really good skill sets that I learned in the telecommunications sector that I can bring over here. I'll give you another example. One of the things that I learned from my past careers working in broadband is the importance of the air quote little guy, right? And we saw this during the pandemic. During the pandemic, there were people who were less fortunate that did not have access to internet access, right? They didn't have access to certain tools that one would expect they would have access to. But a lot was done to meet the need, right? At the time, there was a lot of efforts made both by government, community, and businesses to ensure folks were not left behind during the pandemic in terms of learning, in terms of access to healthcare, right? But who made that happen? How did people even become aware of what the gaps are and what people were doing to fix it? It was public affairs professionals, right? People in the community from these different companies and organizations going out to learn what are the needs of the people during the pandemic. People in government doing the same thing. A lot of the actions and activities that I saw take place during the pandemic made me really proud, honestly, to have gotten my chops in public affairs because I found a lot of those skill sets and attributes help move business forward. So I can talk ad nauseum, Anthony, in case you don't know. Stop me anytime. But
No, it's
my corporate experience, look, I led a team of 1,200 people at Cox, and I called them the heartbeats of Hampton Roads, because I firmly believe that they were the beat of our company, right? They go out every day, they climb ladders, they go into manholes, they fix pole. I mean, they do a whole bunch of stuff in 24 hours. That sometimes you'd be surprised by. I've teased a number of those heartbeats to say, anytime you all want to start a reality show, call me. Call me, right? Life on the street as a real heartbeat at Cox, because the world and the work was pretty fascinating, and they do it with grace and a smile. So that's the kind of stuff that I've been doing, and I'm glad to be here at the council, continuing with that energy.
Something I want to pick up on that you said, Nneka, is about you can't turn these things off, right? You can't turn X off, and really that relates back to the corporate experience you had, where you had those expectations there as well in telecommunications. Everybody expects everything to work all the time, and it just made me think. We've all been trained. I mean, now like we can pull our phone out and we can order an Uber and rate the driver and order, we have all of these abilities to really quickly, we can access things anywhere, it seems like. And what that's done is it's changed the consumer's expectation for how they interact with companies in other ways. Like in the old days, maybe you had a question related to a company's stance, and maybe you'd mail a letter and, wait a month. And now if you send a message on social media, like you're hoping to hear back like right away. You want a response to that. And so the expectations facing leaders in public affairs have just gotten so much more intense because of just all of the wonderful technology that we all take for granted. And I really love how you kind of compare that back to your own telecommunications experience. That's, we have these always on expectations, and we really need to bring that into this industry as well. It's so important that we recognize, not that we can always be perfect and be there every moment for everybody, but that's the expectation. And we have to just live up to that expectation the best we can.
That's right. That's right. That we're in an era where going viral happens on almost a daily basis, right? What does that mean for the public affairs professional? It means you have to be prepared that something could go viral in your world at any time during the day. And you're right. Well, that grace of, we'll get back to you in 30 days or a month of a time long past us is gone. People now expect a response within 20 minutes. And sometimes if you don't respond in 20 minutes, it gets escalated. You know how it is, Anthony. So, but our folks are ready.
One of the things I'm always really interested in, Nneka, is when a leader takes on a new role, there's a type of influence on the inside that's really important. You have a lot of people that you have to communicate with and align with. And, talking about being always on, people want to know pretty quickly, like, who's this new leader and so forth. And so I'm always interested in the breakthrough tactics that different chief influencers have. And I know for you, you really value personalized communication. And then that's something that, you've done throughout your career. And I wonder if you could talk about some of the ways that you found effective to build trust and connection, across your career, and how those, manifested themselves when you started this new role 7 months ago. Because I was impressed by some of the different ways that you connected with stakeholders during that time.
Oh, thank you, Anthony. You were kind. It's like starting a new role, right? It's almost like start the first day of kindergarten or first day of school. Like, you're excited. I don't know about you, but I remember when my first day of school, I was always excited and nervous at the same time. I had
I got to pick out that outfit.
outfits planned. I've got my hairdo going. I've got my nail polish. Like, I kind of know what I want to do. But then inside, I'm like, oh my gosh, are they going to like me? Like, is the teacher going to be cool? Right? Am I going to make friends? And I've had the same experience in the workplace. And one of the things I've tried to do to ground myself in embarking on a new journey is saying, first, I'd like to listen. Listen, right? Because I walk in knowing that I don't know everything. I don't know all the answers, and it's okay not to know. But the only way I can know and learn is by listening. The second is learning. What can I learn from the person that's in front of me in a way that makes them feel comfortable, right? Because if you're not comfortable, you won't share, right? Just think about it. So I really go in with an intention of listening, learning in a way that makes the person I'm engaging with feel comfortable, leading where the opportunity rises. And by leading, I mean lending my voice in a way that suits the moment to move forward or to pause. And last but not least, which is uncommon in the workplace, love. Listen, learn, lead, and love. And love for me is important. I view work as the new temple. And I say this all the time. Work is my temple, right? And I want to love in my temple. So how do I go about carrying out my work and doing what I believe I'm called to do in a way that shows love in the workplace? And by love, I mean that brotherly sister love for another human. Not talking about romance, just talking about straight up love. And so far, that has worked well for me. I've learned that at the end of the day, people who come to work by and large are coming to experience something bigger, right? They want to know that what they're working on matters, that they're adding value, and they're being rewarded and recognized for that value they're adding. And if I can help or support a colleague, whether they report to me or I report to them, whatever the pecking order is, to move along that love journey at work, I consider that to be success. So that's the approach I've always taken, and that's the approach I've taken starting at the council. I did a number of listening sessions with board members, with my own team. We embarked on this framework called Mercy framework, and that stands for maintain, expand, reduce, cease, and introduce. It was my opportunity to learn from the team using the framework. What are some things we need to maintain? What are some stuff we need to expand, reduce, cease, or even add? And I use that framework too in my journey in speaking to our vendors, in speaking to our partners, in speaking to our consultants. I had a strategy session last week with our executive committee. Same philosophy, right? So I've tried to walk into a space learning as much as I can, listening even more, and engaging people on a personal level to better understand them. Because I believe if you understand the person, the human you're interacting with, right, you will have positive outcomes. That's my firm belief. Some people are transactional, Anthony. I'm not, at least I try not to be. It has to feel authentic for me to be able to move forward. And authenticity to me is engaging with people in a way that centers the human first.
number one, I want to say I really love the Mercy framework. I think it's a framework that so many leaders could use, whether they're coming into a new role, whether they're working with a team to evaluate where they are. And just you said it a couple of times. I just want to read. So maintain, expand, reduce, cease, or introduce. And I love that order. Figure out, what we want to maintain, expand, reduce, and cease before we get to introduce, because it's hard to add new things if you don't make some room. And so I just want to say, may we steal, may we borrow that framework, may we use it, because I think it's a really good one.
Please feel free to borrow. No need to steal. Don't want you jailed. Feel free to borrow. And the reason why it introduces the last, Anthony, is because, especially again for people in the work of influence, right, which I believe is a superpower, it is so easy to take on so much without letting go of things you need to let go of. And if you don't do it properly, you will burn out. You won't achieve your outcomes. So cease where you can. Cease where it makes sense before you introduce.
What's the hardest thing when you come in about getting a team to look at that framework and be comfortable telling you what they're comfortable, hey, maybe we could stop doing this thing, or maybe we could reduce this thing? Because I don't know, it's always hard to take away once you're already doing something. And I mean, how do you create a culture that gives people permission to say, hey, Nneka, we've been doing this thing, but we think maybe it's okay if we don't do it or we stop doing it? Because I feel like some folks just may not want to speak up, and you've done some things to maybe make people feel more comfortable doing that. What have you learned from that?
Well, I've learned one, again, it goes back to being personal and listening, right? No one wants to hear that their baby is ugly. So they're right. So, building that trust with the team so that they understand where, as a leader, you're coming from. And I tell my team, hey, your baby isn't ugly. That's not what this is about, right? And there is no penalty or knock for sharing your ideas. So we come in with an attitude of respect, right? That we respect and honor that which has come before us in terms of work, because those are contributions. And it's important to acknowledge and respect those contributions. And once the team understands and they start to understand, oh, wait, she really means what she's saying, that we're going to respect this work. Your baby isn't ugly. Talk to me about why we should continue. The information starts to flow naturally. One of the things I found really eye-opening with my team is, I remember one meeting we had, we thought it was going to be an hour. We went for maybe about 3 hours. At least I thought it was going to be an hour. We did surveys using the Mercy framework where we sent it out to the team to say, talk to us about your sentiments, feelings, comments around our internal operations. Anthony, we got 22 pages of remarks. I'm still shocked by that, right? But I think it's also because the team came to understand and trust, one, your baby isn't ugly. It's not a reflection on your capabilities. It's simply a way of growing, right? And in order to grow, sometimes you have to prune to grow. And once we got into that mindset, we've been sailing.
This episode is brought to you by the George Washington University's College of Professional Studies. With in-person and online programs ranging from master's degrees in public relations strategy to certificate programs in digital communications, GW offers more than just the credentials to help working professionals get ahead. It prepares them to be leaders in their field. Check out cps.gwu.edu for more information. Sometimes you have to prune to grow. That's a really great line. So true. And for anybody who spends time in a garden, you certainly know that is definitely the case. You also mentioned authenticity. And I really want to kind of shift gears to talk about that. We've spoken a lot about influence on the inside, which I think is really important. I want to kind of shift a little bit more to influence on the outside, although authenticity is obviously important for both. Tell me about the idea of you, Inc., and how you think leaders need to embrace their personal brand in a world where, your personal and your professional are not totally separate. Maybe they once were, I don't know, but they certainly aren't nowadays.
Look, you're speaking my language, Anthony. You, Inc., right? If you approach people, if you approach yourself as an entity, right? I think it's important that as that entity, you recognize you have family that you're serving, you have friends that you're serving, you have a pet that you're serving, you have colleagues that you're serving. If you view yourself as a servant, right? These are the people as you Inc. that you are serving. It's important that there's some consistency in how you show up for these people. Back in the day, yes, there was a time when you could show up one way, right, at work and show up another way at home. Those days are far behind us. Why? Because we're more public about our private lives. We're more social than we've ever been, right? And so people are looking to see how are you in each room? And you have people that are also sharing how they experience you in different rooms. And that's where authenticity really, really comes into playing. Authenticity doesn't mean, in my view, staying rigid in your definition of who you are. No. But authenticity to me is being consistent with your values, right? And if your values evolve, the way you approach it should also evolve. And I think that's what people are clamoring for today, right? If you're going to tell me my baby is ugly in this room, please make sure you say it in the other room as well, right? Don't tell me my baby is cute in the hallway and then turn around in the bathroom and be like, can you believe how her baby looks? That doesn't work, right? But the truth is, Anthony, we know these things. It's common sense, which my grandma would say is not so common. But it is so important today, right? At a time when we have so much, we have a surplus of information and a deficit of attention. What is clear is that which rings true and authentic. So being consistent in that regard, I think, is very important.
I think that's something we should underscore. And there's so much happening in the world around that. I just had the opportunity to spend time with a journalist, and we were talking about this balance that in the old days of journalism, you were trained to make sure that you were not part of the story, that it was a totally separate thing from you. And now, consumers kind of like it when they think that the person reporting on something has a perspective or a lived experience that might, make it, that bring that authenticity in, and that maybe it's even more believable, or it brings a different spin on it. And the journalist mentioned to me how she had a health issue, and she used that to sort of launch a series. And also she was going to have to be out for a while. So she had some necessity of telling her audience so that they weren't like, where'd she go? And she said, she used herself as the springboard, but then quickly they got feedback from listeners and audience members who shared their own stories. And it became this really powerful, incredible series that made an impact. And, so she sort of shared that balance of, look, I don't want it to be all about me all the time. That's not what we're looking for. I don't want to bring a whole bunch of bias into it. I don't want to just be the center. But at the same time, if I try to be totally detached from reality when I'm personally experiencing something that we're reporting on, actually that vulnerability and authenticity allows others to feel like they can share their story. And I thought that was really powerful. And I think it goes back to what you're saying about authenticity. And I wanted to even maybe bring it to a specific tool, because I know, you really like LinkedIn, and thought leadership on LinkedIn is something that's important to you. Anybody who knows me, I'm a big LinkedIn fan. I just think it's the most trusted social platform. It's where I love to spend time to connect with people. If I go on vacation, I turn off my work email. I still like to check LinkedIn because it's an enjoyable thing to help celebrate milestones and to see what's going on. So I wonder if you could share a little bit about your perspective, rooted in authenticity, what you were saying earlier about how you show up on platforms like LinkedIn.
And first, let me just give a nod to the journalist you mentioned the other day, because I do applaud those folks who are on the front lines of information. That's how I view journalists, right? Where you were brought up to not be in the news, but now you're in an era where people want to know about the news behind the news. So shout out to her or him for sharing, their medical history and making a difference. With LinkedIn, which is like my all-time favorite platform, I can't even lie, I'm with you on that. At first I was reluctant to get on LinkedIn. I also came up in my career at a time when, you know, you had to put that disclaimer out there. These views here are mine and not the company's,
Yeah.
etc. And I remember one of my colleagues who's in media saying to me, you know, do you know that there might be people who would value hearing from you and could learn from you, and that might help them in their careers? Anthony, I hadn't thought about that. I don't know why. And this was maybe about 9 years ago, but I really hadn't thought of it. I had thought of LinkedIn and these platforms as, look at me and here I am. And that's not necessarily my personality. But once she said that, that shifted for me, right? And the shift for me became, how can I serve someone else using LinkedIn as a platform? And that service for me is always rooted in upliftment, right? I think there's enough in this world that can try and bring anybody's spirits down. So I'm pro, how do we lift you up? Right? And how do I lift you up in a way that is true? And if I'm not in the mood to lift up, I am not going to do a post. So there's that. But another thing with LinkedIn too, I think that I found to be extremely powerful as an influencing tool is it's an exchange, it's a dialogue, right? You put something out there, people get a chance to respond. So it's not a one-way street. And I really like that about LinkedIn. To the point about authenticity on the platform, I can tell you from experience, people know, right? If you're not being who you think you are on those platforms, if you're not stacking up to it, people also, I find, respect on LinkedIn. This has been my experience. Hearing you say, hey, I'm not really sure what to think right now about XYZ, figure out the blanks. We've come to that place where I find people are looking for people and listening and learning from people who, somewhat like them, right, are being human about their encounter and not painting a rosy picture that doesn't exist, but not painting a grim picture either. That's been my experience with LinkedIn. And I'll wrap this up on the LinkedIn piece. LinkedIn, interestingly, has changed some of its algorithms, which I find pretty profound, right? And so videos are trending or getting more attention. And I'm one of those, Anthony, who I'd rather do a podcast than do a video. I would rather do that, right? I don't believe in staring into the big, beautiful eyes of the camera like I'm doing now. But one of the things that I learned on LinkedIn when I was doing videos is there were so many people who were like me, who are not comfortable doing videos. And in me doing a video, I would have some of my employees say, hey, Nneka, you did this video? I saw that, so I decided to do this video, right? That made my day. That filled my cup because I'm like, okay, as clumsy as I might think I am on video, someone saw something there that inspired them to take action about their own media authority. So it's a win-win.
I love that. Yeah, you never know who you might inspire by doing something, even if it's a little outside your comfort zone. And certainly I've heard so many similar stories from leaders where the chief executive, somebody who comes to mind is Chuck Henderson from the American Diabetes Association, one of our chief influencers, really leveraging a platform like LinkedIn, leaning into it, and then members of his team saying, hey, I saw you do this, and so I decided that, I'm going to do more of this. And I think, that leading by example can certainly make a big difference. You mentioned podcasts. We talked about LinkedIn. You can look around. People have books. People are going viral. What are some of the ways that you decide what to focus on when there are so many other ways that, none of us can do everything? I think if it is kind of a comparison trap, I just wonder if you could talk a little bit about how you've decided what to choose and focus on.
That's a great question. I've tried to prioritize those channels that feel natural and organic to me, right? Yeah. And LinkedIn for me rises to the top. Why? Because it is a professional platform. People there tend to be respectful, right? And I get different viewpoints. I love to think. Like I love to read, and I find we have a lot of thought leaders, right, and thinkers on LinkedIn. So I look at that. I also look at the outcomes, right? What impact am I trying to have? Right? Am I trying to have an impact that I know that people learn differently, right? Some people are auditory learners, some people are visual learners. So that also influences what platforms that I use, right? And then the
Yeah.
outcomes, right? What outcomes am I hoping to achieve? Is it a learning outcome? Is it an outcome of a question that I can do more research on? That also influences where I go. But regardless of whatever platform it is, right? For me, at the end of the day, one of the things I think about is digital first. I think too, because that's just the nature of where we are today, media wise. And then I tend to do sideways selfies. You may know this about me on
Yeah.
LinkedIn because I don't really know how to point straight with the camera, so it's always sideways. But also looking at ways of delivering content in a way that people find uplifting and educational. I look at that as well.
And correct me if I'm wrong. I think I remember you saying once to me something about like a Queen Elizabeth rule that you like.
Oh, yeah. Oh my gosh. So God rest her soul. Queen Elizabeth had this communication role, as I understand it, and she would ask herself these three questions: Is it kind? Is it necessary? And is it true? And all three had to be true for her to make a comment. And I try to live by that rule, Anthony, right? Especially in my influencing style. Is what I'm about to say or post kind? Is it necessary? And is it true? Because the facts do matter. And sometimes, right? It can be kind, but unnecessary. So then I have to ask myself, so why are you doing this? And then I tell myself, well, I just want to do it. Okay, then it becomes necessary. But those three principles that the Queen espoused are principles that I try to live by in my influencing style.
I love that. I can picture that and that iconic accent.
Oh,
You know that British accent. But that's so good. Is it kind? Is it necessary? Is it true? And I just have to say I love your frameworks that you have because I just think it's such a great way to build things. The Mercy framework just being such a wonderful one. Um, one of the things I'm always curious about with leaders, with chief influencers, is where they get inspiration outside of their industry or outside of their day job. Because sometimes I think the coolest ideas can come from a different place, and then we can sort of apply them to what we do. And I wonder if you can share a little bit about maybe where you've gotten inspiration
yeah.
outside of the world of public affairs or the world of telecom.
Wow. So I am inspired by experiences. I'm one who you'll always hear me ask, what kind of experience, do I want my members to have? What kind of experience do I want my guests to have? So I always look for inspiration in terms of experiences. And I have a couple of experiences that I've either read about or experienced myself that have inspired me lately. One is with a mattress company called Hastings. I hope I'm not butchering their name. And there was a journalist, her name is Claire Blackwell, who wrote about her experience purchasing a $54,000 mattress. Made the purchase, Anthony. 54 grand, right?
Whoa.
And her experience with the mattress. And what inspired me about it is not just that she purchased a mattress, because, geez, that's an undertaking, but she took her time to understand what went into making the mattress. So it turns out that it's made of, I don't know, maybe like horsehair or really fine hair, and you can sleep on it forever. And then she did even more than that. She invited members of her family to sleep on her mattress. And so she had aunts and, cousins, if I remember the story right, driving down to New York where she is, right, to experience the mattress. And what inspired me about that experience was it was a ripple effect experience, right? Some would look at it and say, the mattress cost how much? 54 grand? I looked at it and said, oh, she made an investment in her relaxation and her sleep, right? So I was certainly inspired by that. I'm inspired too by other things that might be little things, small things, right? Like a colleague of mine um, mentioned, she has a practice. And for those of you who don't know her, she's Laura Horsley. I call her Deadline behind her back because she's always on deadline. She's a communications person, gotta love it. And she has a practice of tipping people, especially at the ballet, before they get her car, before they take her car, and after they bring her car back. Twice. Why does she do this? Because the person who took your car keys might not be the same person who brings back your car keys. And that inspires me, Anthony. Like, I'm inspired by the thoughtfulness of that gesture, right? And when I hear these stories and I experience these things, it makes me think, how do I deliver that same type of personalized feeling for my members, for my colleague, right? For somebody who's in my circle. So those are the things that inspire me. I get inspiration sometimes from walking around in hotels, looking at hotel bathrooms, which is a whole other story. But mainly it's experiences. Yeah, I'm one of those. I'll go into a hotel bathroom, kind of look around and see, okay, what kind of experience are we having here? And then just walk out.
Well, you notice things like a really nice hand soap, right? In a certain
Yes.
and there's certain little touches like the valet that gets that tip from Laura before, and then someone else. There's certain things that you can do
Mhm.
that change the way people feel. And I
Yeah.
think, around the mattress, I mean, most people would probably never spend that on a mattress, but the fact that that exists and that there are people who would invest that much, there's something they've done to make it special. And I do think it's really important in influence for us to think about, what do we do to make sure that we're creating the experience that we intend to create,
Yes.
um, to make people feel the way that we would like them to feel.
Yes.
And we can accomplish that, the influence of whether it's our personal brand or our organization's brand, I mean, it makes a really big impact. And I think I love how you're looking for those things around the corner and looking at seeing different opportunities to do that. And I have to shout out a book. It's actually behind me. The Art of Gathering by Priya Parker is such a great book because it
Yes.
invites us to think about any event or bringing people together and just doing it with intention, and I think that tension around experiences, a lot of what you've talked about today, whether it's, assessing what we're doing and what we should do more of, less of, et cetera, through your Mercy framework, how we show up with our personal brand. It really does come down to intention. Is that a word that resonates with you? Because it's a word that just, to me, describes a lot of what, of the themes of what I've heard you say today.
Yes. Intention. That is like, that is the word. It's hashtag intention, right? How do we live and make our mark with intentionality? Right? Whatever that dash is, how do we make sure that it's jam packed and aligned with what we want to do, and that it leaves people better than they found them? Intention is the word, and these are the experiences that I relish. Those that are intentional, and they're the experiences that I hope that I'm able to curate for great board members like you and other members at the council and people that just come into my orbit generally. Intention.
So with that word in mind, let me ask you one final question.
Sure.
Nneka, you've managed operations, 1,200 employees in one case. You've advised CEOs, you shaped public policy. Now you lead this global organization. I know you're probably having to go back and forth to Brussels for the work that you do now. As you think about that journey, how do you define influence today, and how has that evolved across that journey?
Influence. How do well, influence today, I say, to influence well, it has to be rooted in intention. There are so many things that we as people today are inundated with. We are in an era of surplus, in a sense, surplus of information, surplus of videos, surplus of data, right? And so, in order to influence, I view influence as getting someone to take an action, right, that the otherwise would not take, but for your urging. And in order to do that, it's important that we listen intently to that other and influence in a way that makes sense for them. And that is all rooted in intention. And I think the role of the influencer of tomorrow is going to be more than just getting someone else to take an action or do something that they otherwise would not do. I think the influencer of tomorrow is going to be getting that done and ensuring that the influencee feels good about the action that they're going to take. That, I believe, is the next level game of the chief influencer.
Oh, I love that. What a great way to sort of bring everything that we've talked about today together. Influencing with intention. And that's kind of on both sides of it. Not just getting the person to act and influencing them in that way, but you want them to feel good about it,
Yeah.
not do it under duress.
Right.
And in this discussion today, which I have loved, I mean, we talked a lot about how public affairs has changed. We live in this world that you called a VUCA world: volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And you talked about how over the last 7 months, you've been really thinking intentionally about how to deliver more value to the C-suite in this world where public affairs is not just a cost center.
That's right, money. We're an investment center.
It is an investment center, and that businesses are investing because they're people on the inside and the outside. They don't want to just know what they sell or what they do. They want to know the why. They want to know what they stand for. And your experience, I think, in this role is so interesting because you've led public affairs, but you've also led teams of over 1,000 people. And you talked about how you, in all those situations, have really tried to personalize your communication in the way that you connect with people, those heartbeats, as you called them, of 1,200 of them when you were at Cox, for example. And you talked about how in today's world, the expectations, the bar has been raised, just like, this is rooted in your telecom background. Everybody expects it's going to always work all the time. We have that expectation. Well, those expectations have changed in many other areas of our lives, and that flows to public affairs and that urgent response. They're not waiting for a letter for 30 days. They want that respond to their post on X in 20 minutes.
That's right.
And so how do we prioritize? What is important is one of the questions I had coming in. And you shared this really fantastic framework about how you start at the center and do it, your Mercy framework. What should we maintain? What should we expand? What should we reduce? What should we cease? And then finally, at the end, on purpose, intentionally, what should we introduce? And starting at the center with that, we kind of shifted into this discussion about authenticity and about personal brand and about you, Inc. And I loved some of the examples you gave of elevating others, about how you show up on platforms like LinkedIn with your sideways selfies and how you connect with others that way. And then asking this question, not just the tactics that we talked about, but the sort of underlying question, the Queen Elizabeth rule: is it kind? Is it necessary? Is it true? And I think that's just such, again, another great framework and a great thing for all of us to take back. So what an intentional conversation. What a wide-ranging conversation. I know our listeners know exactly why we asked you to be a guest on Chief Influencer today. And I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your story with us, especially so early into your journey in the new role, because some folks, they like to wait a little longer. And I just love that you were willing to do it this early. And I think we took a lot of ways that we can bring, whether we work in public affairs or whether we work in another environment. So thank you for sharing your story of intentional influence with us today, Nneka.
Thank you, Anthony. Hearts to you. And thank you for being the influencer of influencers. I am leaving this podcast feeling better, right? Just about my experience. So thank you.
Chief Influencer is a production of Social Driver. We help clients transform complexity into clarity with people-centered strategies. Whether you're looking to elevate the influence of your brand or of your leaders, check out socialdriver.com to learn more. For show notes or to nominate a guest, visit us at chiefinfluencer.org or follow Chief Influencer on LinkedIn.